So, what are you like when you play games? We're getting to that time of the year. We've already talked about the Christmas time when, gather around the table, play some fun games. What are you like? Who are the competitive people out there? 3 people. There you go. I'm sure there's double hands at the back. There you go. I'm so competitive. I've got 2 hands. I beat everybody in this room. Let me be honest with you. When it comes to playing games, I am competitive. I play to win. If there's a scoreboard, I want to be on the scoreboard. I want to be at the top of the scoreboard. And so in our family, we are quite competitive. Certainly my wife, Louise, and I, when we play, we are competitive and would compete against each other. And actually, I remember a long time ago, this is before we were married, we were at a family barbecue thing and in the Forest of Dean, and we played this big game of rounders. There was quite loads of us there, and I was on the opposite side to Louise. So I was fielding, and it was her turn. She smacked this ball for miles, and she was running around, and I was between sort of second and third base, and I thought, I can't let her get to that base. So I basically rugby tackled her to the ground. Everybody was sort of stunned into silence, thinking, oh my word, what just happened? And looking back, I think that's probably not the best way to play rounders, or the best way to treat your girlfriend who you'd hope one day would become your wife. But anyway, we're married, so that it all works out okay in the end. But that sort of shows the level of my competition or my competitive nature. And the thing about competition is I think competition is okay. In the right place and at the right level, it is okay. It's okay to give awards for people who come first or second or third. Not third. Not everybody has to get an award when it comes to competing. And that might sound controversial. I know all these sort of participation awards, and yeah, there's something in that. But it's okay to actually have competition. It teaches us resilience. It teaches us so many things about life. It teaches us about commitment and teamwork and strategy. And actually, when you come to doing your GCSEs, you don't all get the same, do you? You get rewarded for how much work and how much effort you put in. And the same is true in some of those competitions and in that. It's okay to play games. It's okay to be competitive in the right place and at the right level. I think rugby tackling somebody when you're playing rounders is probably not the right level. But there's one arena we've been talking about throughout the series where it is never okay to play games, where it's never okay to be competitive, and that's the arena of relationships. And if you've been with us for the last couple of weeks, we've said time and time again throughout this series that when it comes to relationships, a game that requires a loser is a game that nobody wins. When we start to play games in relationships, if it requires a loser, actually nobody wins. And we thought about this in the arena of arguments. We've all had arguments at home with our kids, with our husbands and our wives, with our families, with our neighbors, with whoever. And you might think, what happens when you win an argument? Actually, what do you win when you win an argument? You might be proved that you're right. You might have said something that's really clever or quick or cutting that shuts the argument down, but actually, what did you win? You won the argument, but now you sort of lost the relationship. Now you're sleeping on the couch, or your kids won't talk to you, or your friends think you're a jerk, or whatever it is. We think we've won something, but actually we end up losing something in it, because when it comes to relationships, a game that requires a loser is a game that nobody wins. So we're going to think about one of the games that we play in relationships, and actually this game is probably the most toxic of them all. But it's also one of the most common. It's a game that we play almost every day, often without even realizing it. And this game, you don't need a board, you don't need cards, you don't need dice, you don't need a team. You can play silently, you can play invisibly. And often, most of the time, when you play this game, the person you're competing against doesn't even know that you're playing. Any ideas what the game is? It's the comparison game. And the comparison game is something that we start early on in life. When we're kids, we notice who's faster, who's better at drawing, who's got the cool lunchbox, or the nicer trainers. And when we're kids, we compare ourselves against the other kids around us. It's sort of inbuilt within us. Comparison starts early. But as we grow up, the game doesn't stop. It just changes. We just go up to the next next level. And now we might not compare, like who's got the nicest trainers, although I did notice Dan, who's leading our band, got some really nice trainers on this morning. But we start to compare other things. We compare things like jobs or salaries or the holidays that we go on. We might even compare our marriages. If we have kids, we compare our kids' achievements. I often spend time with competitive parents who are just bragging about how great their kids are, and they're actually sort of living vicariously through their kids. If you have kids who are into sport, if you stand on the touchline, that happens so many times. We compare social circles, we compare body shapes, we compare lifestyles, and it doesn't matter how old we are or how young we are, the comparison game is a game that is so common, that is so prevalent in life. And this thing, social media, has turned comparison into a full-time hobby. You suddenly can go from a quick look and quick comparing to actually you spend your life just scrolling through reels or scrolling through somebody else's feed, and you're looking, you're sort of comparing your life against their highlight reel. If you follow me on social media, you think I'm always on holiday, because I only ever post when I'm on holiday. And then if you're trying to compare things, well, I'm just in Bracknell, or I've just gone to Sainsbury's, and then comparing against that, it's just a false comparison. And what happens, when we start to measure ourselves against our whole life against these other people, we're measuring our normal life against their best moments. Here's the truth. Nobody wins the comparison game. Nobody wins it. You just end up tired or bitter or empty or all three of those things. So the question that we need to ask ourselves this morning is, what is this game really costing us? When we play the comparison game, as I'm sure all of us do at regular points throughout our lives, and actually regular points throughout the week, if not regular points throughout the day, what does it really cost us? And how do we stop playing it? Well, there's two main ways. We need to understand how we play it. There's two main ways that we play the comparison game. First off is downward comparison. So this is when you look down at someone else and think, well, at least I'm doing better than they are. And at least, I have a nicer car or a nicer house or whatever it is, and we compare downwards. And what this does, when we play the comparison game downwards, it leads to pride, it leads to superiority, it leads to sort of judgmentalism in us. And we think, yeah, I'm better than you, I'm more superior than you. So there's downward comparison. And then we have upward comparison. And this is the dangerous one, because when we play the comparison game this way, we start to look at other people and we think to ourselves, I want what they have. And actually we convince ourselves that, if only I had what they had, then I would be content. The thing that's missing in my life is the thing that they have. And I need to have what they have, because then everything would be fine for me. And we think, if only I had their life, or if only I had their success, or if only I had their marriage. Sometimes we think, if only I had their husband or I had their wife, if only I had their opportunities. The thing that is missing from my life is the thing that they have, and I want it. And when we play the upward comparison game, it just sort of ends up making us feel, less than. It ends up making us feel bitter. It ends up making us feel that, we're losing out on so many things, and we're not content in who we are and what we have. And the thing about the comparison game is, it happens at any age, as I said, but it's been happening since the beginning of time. It's not a new thing. The comparison game has been going on since human beings have been on the planet. And we've been playing the comparison game long before Facebook or TikTok or Instagram or even MySpace or Friends Reunited was a thing. Long before social media existed, we've been playing the comparison game. And so I want to look at something that somebody wrote thousands of years ago. There's a guy called Solomon who was thought of as one of the wisest people ever to live. And Solomon actually, he had it all. He was king, he was rich, he was powerful, people looked up to him, and he was a very wise person. And he wrote a couple of the books that we find in the Old Testament. And there's a book called Proverbs that's full of these really wise sayings. Actually, lots of them are sayings that we use today in just normal everyday life, and we're not even aware, or many people are not aware, that they actually have their origin in Scripture, that Solomon or other people once said them. And so thousands of years ago, Solomon made this incredibly insightful observation. This is what he says. A heart at peace gives light to the body, but envy rots the bones. And if you've ever had that sinking feeling, as you've been scrolling through somebody else's feed on social media and you're thinking to yourself, well, wow, how do I compare against them? They have it all. They're so much better than me, so much more superior than me, so much, they have more money than me, or they're more successful than me. If you have that bitterness that starts to creep in towards other people, actually, when they haven't done anything wrong, if you have that feeling that you are less than, well, you know what Solomon is talking about. He says a heart at peace gives life to the body, but when envy comes on, it rots the bones. See, the thing about envy is it's a toxin. It's a soul toxin. Envy corrodes joy. Envy corrodes gratitude. It corrodes trust. It corrodes relationship. Envy corrodes you. And Solomon's sort of pointing this out. And actually, we know that because there's been times in our life when we've played the comparison game and we're comparing against somebody else and we become envious about someone else. It doesn't give us peace. It doesn't give life to the body. It starts to rot us from the core. Bitterness sort of eats away at us from the inside out. And this sort of metaphorical, this pictorial language that Solomon uses is actually describing something that I'm pretty sure all of us have been in that situation where the envy is taking from us, it's not giving to us. And so Solomon, full of this wisdom, he wrote this other book called Ecclesiastes, which is found in the wisdom literature section of the Old Testament. And it's poetical, it's metaphorical. He uses pictures and creative language, like similar to what's going on in Proverbs, to sort of communicate about life. And as I said, Solomon had it all. He's writing the Ecclesiastes from this point of view, from somebody who's achieved everything that there was to achieve. There wasn't really anybody alive at that time who had more than Solomon, who was in that positional status. If you wanted to be somebody, you'd want to be Solomon, because he was the person of power, he was the person of prestige, he was the famous person, he was the prominent person. And so he writes like this book, basically looking back. He's chased after everything that people chase after. He's experienced everything that's worth experiencing, and he writes this book that's sort of saying, well, after looking at all of this stuff and experiencing all of this stuff, this is what's pointless. This is what's worthless for chasing after, and this is what's worth going after. So let's take a look at something he says in chapter 4. He says, all toil and achievement spring from one person's envy of another. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Let's just start on this first bit. All toil and achievement spring from one person's envy of another. Solomon is talking about this thing that we're talking about, the comparison game, that actually toil or our hard work or our need for success and achievement. Now, these things are not necessarily bad, but what's the thing that motivates you? What's the thing that motivates you or drives you to be better or to achieve more? Solomon says it's actually driven by envy of somebody else. So that promotion that you're chasing after, well, Solomon is saying, well, perhaps you're chasing after that because somebody else got one, or you want people to look up to you and play the comparison game with you. That new car that you're after, well, yeah, we need a new car and I could just get this car, but I want that car because the neighbor's got that car. Or as I drive around, I want people to think good things about me. I'm comparing myself against them, but I also want people to play the comparison game against me. I want people to be comparing upward to me. All of these things that we do in life is driven by comparison. It's driven by envy. And the thing about this that's so important is that envy can motivate your success, but it will end up suffocating your soul. And it's the stuff that Solomon is talking about here. Envy drives us, it motivates us, it inspires us to do things. But in the end, we're left with less. We're left feeling exhausted. Our soul is taken away. And he says, this too is meaningless. Solomon's talked a lot about meaningless things. So this thing, this desire of trying to compare against somebody else and using that comparison to drive you forward, it's meaningless. It's like a chasing after the wind. Picture somebody sprinting down a field, just trying to catch the wind. It's impossible. It's exhausting. It's pointless. This is the comparison game. And the point about it is there will always be somebody prettier than you. There will always be somebody richer than you. There will always be somebody more successful or more accomplished than you. So when we play this game, it's like we're just trying to chase after the wind. We run and we expel all of this energy, but we never get to where we want. We never become satisfied. We never become content because there's always somebody who gets there quicker. Here's the thing. Whoa. Comparison promises fulfillment, but it delivers exhaustion. You know, comparison promises fulfillment. It says, if only I had what they had, then I would be fulfilled. Then I would be content. But in the end, even if we take what they have, we're still left exhausted because we're chasing after something else. Because then we see something else that somebody else has, and we compare against that, and it never stops. It's an endless cycle. Solomon goes on to say, I'm going to play the comparison game with somebody who has a remote that works. I'm going to click this once. Is it going to work? No. John, you're going to have to take control. That's okay. So, Solomon goes on to say, fools fold their hands and ruin themselves. Now, this is the opposite of toil. And this is a Hebrew way of saying, folding their hands means, that you give up, you do nothing. And it's sort of like, we come to that realization, I can't keep up with them. I can't compete with them. I can't compare with them. So what do? Well, I'm just going to stop trying. I'm not going to bother. I'm going to give up. And apathy sinks in. And, Solomon's actually giving us the opposite of that sort of envy-driven success that we can easily swing away to. I'm not going to allow envy to drive me. So then what do? Well, we just sit down and we become apathetic. And the result of that is it ruins ourselves. This is as dangerous as playing the comparison game. This passivity ruins life just as much as envy does. The answer isn't to stop running your race. It's to stop comparing yourself against somebody else. It's to stop actually allowing comparison and the comparison game to drive you and to leave you feeling totally dissatisfied. Let's go to the next slide. And he says, better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. I just love the picture that he uses. A handful, again in Hebrew, is sort of represents your portion, your life, your circumstances, your God-given season that you're in. And he's saying it's better to have one handful that's held with peace, that's open-handed, that's not clutched or striving. It's better to have one handful with tranquility than two hands that are clutched tightly. Let me demonstrate what Solomon is talking about if we go to the next slide, John. And he's talking about this sort of open-handed response. And, so I've got a hand of sand, really. And he's sort of like, this is your hand. It's better to have an open hand that's relaxed. There's no tension there. There's no fear. There's no grasping. And what's in my hand, this is my life. This is my portion. This is my gifts. This is my story. This is my family. And this handful is enough. But what happens when we start to play the comparison game is we compare our handful with somebody else's handful, and we start to grip more tightly and hold on. And I think, I want to hold on to what I have, and the tension comes in, and we start losing things. Actually, the thing that we're trying to hold on to, we start slipping away. We end up losing. And of course we can grab more. Of course I can grab, two handfuls of this stuff. But the tighter I squeeze onto it, the more I clench my fist, the more things slip through my fingers. And look at this posture. There's no peace in here. This is not, tranquility. This is striving. This is clenched. This is tension. And I'm not able to receive. I'm not able to receive the blessing from God. I'm not able to enjoy what I have because I'm clinging so tightly to what I have, and I'm grasping after more, and I'm wanting more, and my hands are covered in sand. And Solomon says, better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. And so here's a question that Ecclesiastes, that Solomon leaves us with. If grasping costs us our peace and open-handed living leads to tranquility, then what's driving the way we live? Think about it this way. What is the second handful costing you? What is that second handful when you're going in and you're holding on and you're clenching and you're comparing against other people? What is it costing you? Are you losing sleep? Are you losing joy? Are you losing gratitude? Are you losing contentment? Are you losing moments or precious time with your kids? Are you losing your sense of identity? Are you losing your trust in God because you're going after things and you're comparing and you're competing and you're grabbing and taking over these things? All of those things that are really important to us, when we clench and we don't live it with that tranquility, these things that are important to us slip through our fingers. What's it costing you? Is it, you think it's giving you more? You think, if I could just take and I can strive and I can have all that, I'm achieving more. But actually, am I losing? Let me ask you a different question. Who are you trying to keep up with? This is the question that comparison doesn't want you to ask. Perhaps it's a sibling who seems to be doing better than you. Maybe it's a friend who has it all. Maybe it's a colleague who gets noticed over you. Maybe it's another parent who seems to have it all together, and you're just pleased that you managed to get the kids out and they're alive and dressed. And there they are with their, organic meals and everything, and perfectly sorted and all of those sort of things, and you're like a complete mess, but you're like, at least we're all alive and breathing. Who are you competing with? Who are you competing against? Who are you trying to keep up with? And here's the thing, they probably don't even know that you're playing this game with them. They probably don't even know that you're playing the comparison game. And when your eyes are on them, your hands go from open to close. You tense up, and the very things that you want to receive slips through your fingers. So here's the question. How do we become one handful people? Well, it takes intentionality. It doesn't happen by accident, because by accident, we naturally grab on, we tense up and we clench and we climb after more. It takes intentionality. It doesn't happen by accident. So I want to give you really quickly 3 practices that I think can help us to stop playing the comparison game. These things can help us live as open-handed people. So the first thing is run your race. Stop looking to the left and the right. If you've ever done athletics or ever watched athletics, you know that the runner is in trouble when they start to look around, when they start wondering or worrying where other people are, and their eyes comes off the finish line and their focus starts to become on where these other runners are. And if they look around, that's when they stumble. That's when they fall. That's when they lose the very thing that they were chasing after. And if only they just kept their eyes on the prize, if only they just focused on themselves and the race that they were called to run, instead of worrying about the race that other people are running. Now, that's true in athletics, but it's also true in life, because when we start playing the comparison game, we start looking around left and right, and we forget about our race and we focus on their race. Only you can run your race. The only race you can run is the one that God has given to you, the one that God has created you. Only you can be you. You can't be them. Only you can do the things that you were created to do. And it might be different to what they're doing. And yeah, they might have more of whatever it is. And you look at things, if only I had. But that's not your race. Run your race. Don't miss your calling. Don't miss your purpose. Don't miss your identity. Don't miss your meaning trying to match someone else's place. So the first thing to be a one-handful person is to run your race. The second thing is to fix your focus on Jesus. See, the thing about Jesus is he didn't invite us to believe in him or just to believe in him. He invited us to follow him, to keep in step with him, to keep up with him. And if you need to keep up with somebody, keep up with Jesus. If you need to fix your eyes on somebody and focus on somebody, focus on Jesus, because when our eyes are on him, envy loses its power. When our eyes are on him, comparison dies down and our hands relax, because he leads us into a place of peace, not into a place of pressure. And Jesus invites us to follow him, to be like him. And actually, in him, we find these very things that we're going after. We find that meaning and that purpose and that value and that our identity, that when we fix our eyes on him, we can be one handful, open-handed people. But as soon as we take our eyes off him and we look to the left and the right and start comparing against other people, this is what happens. And those things start slipping through our fingers. So run your race. Fix your eyes on Jesus and choose gratitude. This is so important and so powerful. See, gratitude is how we open our hands again. It recenters our hearts on what God has given us. And I really encourage you to be people who consciously choose gratitude. And there's a bunch of disciplines or ways that you can do that. We used to, when the kids were younger, I don't know why we stopped doing this, but when around the dinner table, we would always talk about something that we're grateful for. What's happened today that you're thankful for? And actually just naming that out is something that's really good. I know many people who keep a gratitude journal. Anybody do that? Who keeps a... Two people, brilliant. That's good. So I encourage you to do that. Louise, my wife, does that. And at the end of the day, she'd write 3 things down that she's grateful for. And she would often say, so what am I grateful for today? What do you think my response would always be? Every single day, I would say this. Me, yeah, every single day. And she said, I've already put you in. I can't put you in again. I'm like, of course you can. You can be grateful for me every single day. But what this does, and actually sometimes it's difficult because when life is hard and actually you're going through those places in life that it's just dark and it's just difficult, choosing gratitude and actually consciously identifying those things that, I want to be thankful for that. I want to be grateful for that is so powerful. So naming those things, however you do it, I really want to encourage you to be somebody who chooses gratitude, who allows yourself to become aware of those things that you're grateful for. Because when you do that, you become open-handed. You stop comparing against somebody else, because when we're grateful, it turns clenched fists into open hands, because we are content with who we are. We are content with what we have. And so this is it. This is what we're aiming for. This is the life that Jesus calls us to or invites us to, is being one handful kind of people. Let's get the band back up on stage as we wrap up this time together. And that's the image that I'd love you to have. I wonder what you're like at the moment. And I wonder if you're somebody who's like this, and actually you're living your life with clenched fists, because you're holding really tightly onto what you have, and you're comparing yourself with other people, and you're thinking, if only I could have that. And the reason I'm not satisfied, the reason I'm not content is because I don't have this, and they have it, and I just want more, and I want more. And actually those very things that you're trying to hold on to is slipping through your fingers. There's no peace here. There's no tranquility here. Jesus invites us to another way. Imagine living your life. Imagine walking out of this place as a one handful kind of person. You're not chasing after the wind. You're not looking over your shoulder. You're not comparing yourself. You're just free to be you. You're free to live. You're free to breathe. You're free to live the life that Solomon describes, the life that Jesus invites you to. So run your race. Fix your eyes on Jesus and choose gratitude. Because here's the thing. Better one handful in peace than 2 in pieces. Let me pray for us. Father God, I thank you so much for just this powerful image that Solomon gives to us. And I pray that you'd help us be honest about ourselves. Where are we playing this game? Who are the people that we are competing against? Lord, help us just to be honest, to acknowledge it. And I pray that you'd help us be people who live in that safety, that security, that tranquility that you offer us. Forgive us, Lord, for those times when we just cling too tightly, when we clench and we go after. Help us to live as one handful, open-handed people, content with who we are, secure in who we are, confident in who you've created us to be, and happy with the portion that you've given us. Bless us, inspire us, encourage us, I pray. Thank you, Lord. Amen.